The three leaders of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan agreed at Camp David last Friday to formalize their trilateral cooperation in a regular and institutional manner. How are the three sides planning to make their cooperation sustainable? How effective will their trilateral network be in countering North Korean threats and provocations? And how will the trio balance their partnership against China's discomfort over the trilateral cooperation? A so-called new era has begun for the trilateral partnership between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, following the three leaders at Camp David Trilateral Summit. Let's break down the key achievements and remaining challenges. Joining me is Professor Kim Hun-wook. Welcome.
Thank you.
And also Professor Kim Jung. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's start with you, Professor Kim Jung. The three countries are doubling down on missile information or information sharing in general to counter North Korean missiles and nuclear threats. Now, how effective will this network be, do you think?
So in the spirit of Camp David agreement here, so there are two important arrangements for the information sharing. One is to activate data sharing mechanism to exchange real-time missile warning data, which will increase the quality of the detection of possible North Korean missile launch. And second one is the to establish the trilateral working group on the DPRK cyber activities in order to contain any kind of illicit funding for WMD for that. So these two information sharing schemes will be hugely improve the data collection activities among three countries, which has been basically compartmentalized, and because of that, there are many inefficiencies in the information gathering. So for that matter, this is going to be huge improvement in terms of information gathering and the detection of North Korean threat.
Right, they're really trying to stay in touch as close as possible, and possibly more than ever. Now, Professor Kim Hun-wook, there'll be also annual multi-domain military drills between the three sides. Now, in what shape or form? Because it's the first time the three sides are conducting something joint in terms of military exercises, right?
Yes, I think the important feature of this summit is that at the principal document, they clarified that the purpose of trilateral meeting is to cooperate in the Indo-Pacific for the world peace and stability. So I think they're gearing their strategic objectives more towards a regional purposes. Of course, at the initial phase of Indo-Pacific strategy by the United States, there were a lot of drills, military drills in this region, pretty much multinational, multilateral drills. So I think within the form of multilateral military drills, U.S., Japan, and Korea already participated. And I think from maybe 1 or 2 years ago, they began trilateral military drills. But that was pretty much not a annual drill. That was just a drill that came up for a specific purposes, like to deal with North Korea issues. As Professor Kim Jung mentioned, North Korea began a lot of development of weapon systems and a lot of tests of its missiles, ILBM, SLBM, ICBM, and all those kind of tests were there. So they came together to be ready for those military provocations of North Korea, how to share their information, things like that. And at the Phnom Penh summit, they agreed upon real-time information sharing amongst the three countries. So I think in the documents this time, they specified their military drills, for example, like anti-pirate military drills, right, and anti-submarine military drills, things like that. So I think after this summit meeting, their military drills will be pretty much, annual, specifically on some purposes and on specific times of the year. They will have more annual drills like Ulchi Freedom Shield. But the difference is that I think after the creations of NCG, U.S.-Korea drill will be pretty much changing. They will begin a drills based upon conventional nuclear initiative. For example, South Korea with conventional weapons and the U.S. with nuclear operations. They're trying to combine those two sets of weapon systems in the military drills. But I don't think a trilateral drill will be on that level. I think that will be pretty much based upon conventional weapon systems, not based upon the U.S. nuclear umbrella.
I see. The joint drills are definitely to keep peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region, but also definitely focusing on that North Korean nuclear and missile threats. Now, speaking of North Korea, Professor Kim Jung, North Korean leader Kim Jung visited a Navy unit and also overlooked a cruise missile test. What's your take on this?
So basically, because of the Ulchi Freedom Shield joint exercise. Anyway, the Kim Jong regime, I think they prepared to schedule a lot of different sort of the provocation, including ICBM launch. So there will be possible response to the joint military exercise. Among them, some of them can be a signal to or against the Trilateral Leaders Agreement at Camp David. But I think the most important thing is that thus far the North Korea's provocation intend to make a split three countries apart. That's kind of the wedge strategy. But basically, due to the Camp David agreement, in terms of the long-term strategy, North Korea miserably failed because this agreement basically increased the cohesion among three countries. So this is very counterproductive outcome from the perspective of Kim Jong-un.
I see. Then, Professor Kim Hun-wook, did you see it coming, Kim attending or inspecting the cruise missile test and also looking over the Navy site? Did you see it coming? Were you surprised?
No, I wasn't really surprised because that was part of North Korea's behaviors for a couple of years. I mean, they already taken a specific policy measures to develop weapon systems for 5 years. And I think their weapons developments, I think, is the only policy they can focus on. I mean, their economic development plan has failed, and another 5-year plan is going on, but I don't think that would be really, successful. They are trying to begin their trade with China, but we know that Chinese economy is now in terrible situations, and Chinese support for North Korea, I don't think would be sufficient that can satisfy North Korea's expectations. They're now dealing with Russia, providing weapon systems to Russia. But I don't think Russia is a country that can provide enough economic support to North Korea. Maybe some technology will be supported by Russia to North Korea. So I think the only policy pathway that Kim Jong-un can follow through in the near future, I think, is weapons development. And maybe throughout those weapons development, I think Kim Jong-un will try to tame their people and can use those weapon systems and nuclear weapons as an important tool to deal with external, international community. So I think this is a part of North Korea's, policy periods and policy periods of policies, not specifically aiming at what is happening at the summit meeting, at the Trilateral Summit.
I see. Professor Kim Jung, you mentioned ICBM launches. I hate to say this, but should we expect any sort of missile launches coming by the end of this month? Because Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise is obviously ongoing. Is that possible?
Theoretically, it is possible, but one of the most important distinctiveness of the North Korean provocation is from outside, it is unpredictable. But from inside, they are well planned and scheduling all the provocations. So there's the typical information asymmetry. So I would say that's possible.
All right, possible, but up in the air in the hands
Sure.
of the leader Kim Jong-un.
Yes.
Now, Professor Kim Hun-wook, speaking of technology, the three leaders also agreed on conceptualizing high-tech fields like AI, semiconductors, space, quantum, you name it. I mean, what does it say about the three sides cooperating on such a sensitive topic that can be intertwined with, security, like you mentioned earlier, with whole Russia and China stuff?
These new fields, high-tech fields, are the key for a state's development now. I mean, especially under the U.S.-China competition. U.S. is now forming a supply chains of those high-techs, centering around the U.S. I mean, they're asking many allies and partners to build the factories in the United States. So I think the question is then those countries like South Korea and Taiwan and Germany and those countries, how they can get those economic benefits out of it. I mean, as all the economic benefits and interests are, entering into the United States economy. So that was, I think, a big homework for the South Korea. But I think at this summit, what is surprising for me is that three countries gathered together and focused on not only military issues, but also a lot of high-tech industries. And they're the ones that can, create the norms and set the rules. And they are the ones that can expedite the procedures of IPAF. They are the ones who can determine what will be the standards of high-tech industries, which means that this is a very important, window of opportunities for the Japan and Korea especially to increase their economic interest on these high-tech industries. So I think that's pretty much, meaningful especially for countries like South Korea.
Definitely. Now, the thing is, though, Professor Kim Jung, it's a big step for the U.S. to get Seoul and Tokyo get involved in this whole security issues, right? Which China is obviously not too happy about, right? What's your outlook on China's reaction on this?
So in this Camp David agreement, the most important differences between Camp David statement and the Phnom Penh statement is the order of the threat. So in the Phnom Penh statement, the most significant threat start with North Korea and Russia and China. This is a kind of reflection of the South Korea's some uncomfortable position in the region here. But this time, for the first time among the trilateral agreement, the China is designated as the most significant threat. And then North Korea, and then Russia here. So this kind of rearrangement of the priority in responding to the threat basically reflect the convergence of the common the security interest among three nations. That's the most important thing. On that basis, say for example, the supply chain early warning system pilot for the important measures to increase the economic security among, say, the South Korea, Japan, and United States. This is based on the pre-existing in the past the economic framework for prosperity is the agreement. And now the United States, Japan, and South Korea declared that they will form a core group to lead the entire membership of Indo-Pacific economic framework. So in that sense, this is a real countering measure against some kind of the assertive and the force-based behavior of China.
Definitely. Now, Professor Kim Hun-wook, U.S. President Joe Biden couldn't stress enough that the summit was obviously not about China, but China was mentioned, directly and indirectly, especially by mentioning how peace and stability have to be kept especially in the Taiwan Strait, right? How did you read his comment on that?
We see that, after this summit, there was principal document. And it also clarified that the purpose of trilateral meeting is for the rules and norms of Indo-Pacific regions. I think three countries emphasized that international law and rule of law based upon values like democracy and human rights are the major purposes why they got together at the Camp David. And I think in that sense, they mentioned not only about China, but also about Russia. What I would like to say is that they are not specifying China and Chinese behavior as threats or challenges of those three countries. But the reason why I mentioned about China is that China has been behaving against the rule of law and international law. For example, building artificial islands in Southeast China Sea, and Russia also invading Ukraine, which is against the international law. So I think, in that sense, the reason why they're against the behaviors of China is because they think that the stability and peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait is important. Because they think that they're against any moves of change of status quo in the Indo-Pacific regions. Not because China is bad, not because China is a communist country. So I think we need to clarify, we need to be sure, we need to clear that why they're mentioning China at the document is because not because they want to blame China, because they want to keep the rule of law and peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region.
That's a good point, Professor Kim Hun-wook. Now, Professor Kim Jung, to keep themselves updated in a timely manner against all kinds of threats or even provocations, the three countries are saying that they are investing in some sort of a technology to secure a three-way hotline, right? Why? I mean, let's talk about the technology itself. How is it different from, calling each other
through the FaceTime or Zoom?
Yeah, right.
So the specific word hotline actually does not exist in the official document. Instead, at the joint press conference, President Biden intentionally mentioned this is going to be the hotline among three leaders there. So the first thing, the most important meaning of this three-way hotline is there will be regular base the leaders as well as the minister level the meeting. And the second one is because of this high level consultation will happen regularly, there are going to be top-down decision-making, which will save huge time resources and increase the authority of the decision-making, which will increase the concerted action with the swift movement. So that's the meaning of, I think, the hotline. And on that spirit, there is always already the, trilateral information sharing arrangements among three nations, and each of them has the general security of the military information agreement. So these two already existing information sharing networks will be recombined to increase the efficiency of the information sharing. I think that kind of, the institutional redesign will be the most important part of so-called the investment on improving the information sharing among three nations and the high level, the politicians.
So securing a communication line that is more efficient, convenient, and more direct, especially among the leaders.
That's right.
Now, Professor Kim Hun-wook, President Yoon Suk-yeol is trying to hold the second trilateral summit here in Seoul. Now, if that happens, when do you think it will actually take place, and possibly any idea where in terms of specific location?
I have no idea. I think even government people would not have any idea about that.
Right.
I mean, they are about to begin talks about when and where. But I think, first, Yoon Suk-yeol government wants to take initiative in the trilateral summit because we have some domestic issues to solve, and the government 5 years is not long. I mean, and also Yoon government took initiative in reverting South Korea-Japan relations, and I think it was South Korea's initiative to which finally came up to Trilateral Summit. So I think South Korea needs to take more initiative in the near future too. And a lot of issues were contained at the summit, and those issues are very important. We need to take initiative and expedite the second and third summits so that we can come up with more detailed outcome and achievements so that they would ultimately come through as a significant South Korea's economic security interests. We don't have enough time. So I think that's one of the reasons why South Korean president mentioned that second meeting will be held in South Korea.
All right, thank you so much for your insight this afternoon, Professor Kim Hun-wook. And also, Professor Kim Jung, it's been a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
We thank you so much for watching Issues and Insiders. We'll be back tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. Korea time. Goodbye.